TGI, the global island.
Yo, what is philosophy? Is philosophy even necessary? How do you define your terms? What tools can we use to make sense out of the world? Me and Matt have a dialectic about Christianity and Buddhism. We talk about what our biggest question would be if we ever met Jordan Peterson. We talk about lost knowledge and the importance of going back to the old philosophers. We get into ChatGPT a little bit too, so I think you might enjoy this episode. Subscribe.
I don't know who this Sophia girl is, but somebody really must have loved her. No, I mean, I think what kind of brought me to this was when you posted that thing that we don't need to, philosophy should not be burning forests, but rather irrigating deserts. And I was like, nah, I disagree. Philosophy owes nobody anything.
You just like burning forests.
And no, I like, no. No, it's like I read them, like, no, I disagree. It doesn't owe anybody anything. It's not that it has to burn forests, but it doesn't owe anybody anything. So what do you think philosophy is?
I think it does. I think the philosophers, like you were bringing up Plato, where we need this enlightened king. I think philosophy owes people to be the most transparent in its thinking.
What do you mean transparent in its thinking?
Be the most aware of how it goes from point A to point B, where like in other methodologies like religion, we can just presuppose things, right? Like God exists, therefore God is going to heal your broken leg, right? And there's no mechanism by which we can go further. Like, yes, there is theology, and like you could spend a lot of time studying that, but there's other presuppositions that
The theologians, aren't going to take time to really philosophize about. But the philosophers are the ones who really try to question everything, take on every perspective, and try to be as transparent in their thinking as possible.
Yeah, but you don't necessarily have to describe it in a way that is as transparent as possible. I mean, philosophy to me can be very artistic, and I hope that it is. This is really where I agree with Paul Feyerabend about philosophy, that it would be wrong for philosophy to start following in the path of most other academic traditions, such as, especially science, which is what, Feyerabend really mentioned about. But it is this pluralism within it, that art, that music, that fiction, books, writing, theaters, plays, speeches, whatever it is, how you want to describe it, can be a form of philosophy. Now, it could be a form.
Philosophy as defined as like a making sense apparatus.
Sure.
These are methodological pluralism. There's many different methods by which we can make sense out of the world.
Absolutely, but it doesn't necessarily owe an answer to something, Aldous Huxley's...
But isn't that the whole point? The whole point is to try to produce answers.
Well, answers to what? Because, so like if we look at this at different levels, so like I understand this in the East, in the West. There's an issue, there's a way, let's say democracy. Democracy has pros, democracy has cons. We need to discuss the pros, cons. We need to understand the systems behind it. We need to understand the governance. We need to understand the bureaucracy.
And we're doing it because we're trying to make the system better.
Yeah, exactly. That's great for Western philosophy, but for Eastern philosophy, it doesn't really make sense because you're not actually trying to answer anything in certain things, especially when you look at like the Kyoto school.
What are you trying to do in Eastern thought? What is the ultimate
relation?
Maybe understanding?
Well, sure. It's a bit.
But isn't that
way of
still an axiomatic goal?
Well, no, because it could also just be your work. You know what I mean? There are people, individuals that this comes more naturally to them, and they're able to express it in different ways. And then this is where it becomes your dharma and your work to essentially philosophize on certain aspects. You look like I want to make you cry.
So what the hell is the goal of the East?
There's no goal. I mean, I can't speak for the East entirely.
You can genuinely say
culture.
that. You can with a straight face say that the East has no orientation to it.
Sure, Buddhism has no goal. It has no goal because any goal that we could essentially philosophize, that we could discuss, anything that we could really write down, it could only point us towards the trueness of this. It can never really fully say it.
But isn't that a goal in and of itself?
To point towards something?
Yeah, like the point of the East is to point to the reality that the philosophizing, the dialogue, the semantics, this is not as objectively, or this is not the ultimate. It's good, but it's not the ultimate.
Yeah, sure, you can.
But that is a narrative. That is still a goal.
Well, but what would be the goal to say that this is not the ultimate, rather than to say Christianity is going to help fix the West's problems?
I understand what you're saying. The Western Judeo-Christian goals are much more practical things in the world, but the East is still, there is an orientation that has a hierarchy of value, and on the top of that hierarchy is oneness.
Well, it's not even that it's at the top of the hierarchy, because
the hierarchy doesn't really exist. The hierarchy
there is no hierarchy. there is absolutely no hierarchy. Hierarchy is completely
fuck
dissolved.
The symbols. So the East ultimately just wants to say all of this thinking is not the thing that's the most real. The thing that is the most real is actually the awareness of the thinking.
Exactly. And, you know, I'm going to criticize the East for you, just to make you happy. For understanding, sure, that's absolutely great. But I guess this is where people like Peterson absolutely love to scream about Christianity, in that it is very beneficial in your everyday life with easier amounts of work than, say, Mahayana Buddhism.
Because it tells you to pick up your cross, it tells you to make sacrifices, to love your family, to love your neighbor as yourself. And these are very practical things that tomorrow morning I can wake up and I could do.
Exactly.
But if a Buddhist monk said, be enlightened,
they would never tell you to be enlightened.
Well, sure.
Some of them would tell you to go away.
They'll if you say enlighten me, they'll say get away from me. They'll say go shine some shoes.
Exactly. Go shine some shoes for 20 years.
But I think that's a little bit of a longer route for someone to love their neighbor as their self, where they can just read the Bible and they could be like, wow, I've actually been really selfish with my wealth, and I haven't really given my wealth to the poor as much as I should be. And that's a very practical thing that I can get from a, biblical text that actually improves my life and improves society, versus the East,
Yes, but the East, sure, you might call it the long way around, but for some people it's the short way around. There is no actual time frame. This can happen instantly. This could happen over 30 years.
So then how do we create a synthesis between the Jordan Peterson types that are very, have a stronghold on the biblical text?
Get over this idea that Buddhism, that mysticism, that this is absurd. Get over your personal righteousness. Get over your religion's righteousness. And understand that you can both give it up and do it all at the same time. So long as you hold on to something.
But what if the Christians say that you're the ones who are being self-righteous, and the Christian is the one who's actually taking on the humility to submit and surrender to a higher form of God?
I'm sorry you feel that way.
Ben Shapiro came in this room. What the hell? Facts don't care about your feelings.
No, that's not it. It's that they feel that way.
Sure.
Do you understand?
Sure.
But like a Buddhist wouldn't combat a Christian the way that you see, like.
But can I just turn that back to you and be like, sorry that you hate Jordan Peterson for loving the biblical stories?
I don't hate him for loving the biblical stories. There's no issue with that. You know what I mean? But I understand what you're saying.
That's still an emotional critique, but I do, philosophically, I do see your point of, you gotta get over this dogmatism that, becoming enlightened and realizing that you could be oneness with God, becoming the godlike self, all those things that we talked about in previous episodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is a selfish or a self-righteous path that is actually sinning. You have to get over that dogma.
And if I was going to say something to Jordan Peterson, if I was going to talk to him in a room or something, when he had that discussion with Richard Dawkins and I'm blanking on his name, Alex O'Connor, that moderated, when he was like, I want to have this discussion because you understand this literature. it would be so much more beneficial. Like, just Alan Watts spoke about this, 50 years ago? The fact that we are too caught up in this Christian way of being, and Christianity being here, I don't think it's necessarily the answer. I understand this loss, but to say that, the universities are crazy, we need more Christianity, even though Christianity has been going on forever, I think there needs to be more synthesis, as Alan Watts did, where you need to understand Christianity and you need to understand the West.
Yeah.
Read Hegel, read D.T. Suzuki, read the Kyoto School, Nishitani. Read all of these people. Read Aleister Crowley. You will see between these so much that can be synthesized. Read Immanuel Kant. There's nothing wrong with reading both and synthesizing them together. Now, I understand not everyone can do this everywhere, always, all the time.
But the people who can, they need to communicate these ideas better.
People that are in these positions, this I'm sick. If Jordan Peterson brings up Cain and Abel one more time, I'm gonna gouge my ears out.
Wait, what? What did Richard say? You quoted Cain and Abel 37 times.
The fact that I could just see Dawkins sitting there reading the book with like a tally mark. Cain, number 147. Abel, number 152. Like, I can just see him doing that, which is hysterical. But I feel like the discussion in philosophy, especially around religion, is completely caught up where these people almost have become theologians that believe these religions. It's almost more how they talk rather than understanding it from a nihilistic point of view through the Kyoto School, where it essentially has no essence. If nothing has essence, let's talk about the mechanisms of everything. Let's talk about the content of everything. See how they stand up and see where their synthesis lies and how they speak to every culture.
Would you agree? I'd love to know your thoughts on this. If we were in the room with Jordan Peterson right now, wouldn't you agree that the greatest question we could ask Jordan Peterson possibly could be, Jordan, I want you to steel man an argument for the East. Tell me everything that you think the East has provided us that is useful and beneficial. And I think that would reveal his knowledge of the East, right? First off, would reveal whether he actually thinks that there is anything beneficial. And that if he, goes on and actually can tell us a lot of really good positive things from the East, then we can follow up and be like, then why aren't you incorporating this in your, splurging of Christian narratives that you think are really good orientating principles for young men to actually pick up their cross and actually go on in the world? Why aren't you also helping all those young men in India, those young men in Asia? Why aren't you helping those young men who these narratives are more familiar to them and be non-sectarian? This is a point that Steven Pinker and Jonathan Haidt and Jordan Peterson, when they were in conversation on one of Jordan's podcasts, Pinker said, we need to have narratives that are non-sectarian.
I agree.
And that was his biggest critique with Jordan, being so obsessed with these only Christian narratives.
I think we need non-sectarian. You need pluralism. Plus, you also need to realize Canada and the United States, these are very multicultural societies. This is not the 1950s where Christianity is the dominant and then you also have the Jews as well. There is so many more religions than there are now. There are so many more different languages, cultures, experiences. You know what I mean? So he is only going to a very select group of people. And while I agree with you that you have a brilliant and wonderful and well thought out question to ask Peterson, there's that absolute, I don't know what you would call me, what is it, a sadist or masochist? Which one's where you want to where
sadism is where you get the enjoyment of watching other people suffer.
Okay, sadism. I would just ask him, Jordan, do you believe in God?
No, come on. This guy. Well, what do you mean by belief?
Yeah, exactly. I just want to hear that. I think he would be going off and I'd be laughing. But
yeah.
No, you're spot on though with your question, because it would help gain a better understanding of where he's at. And I think Sam, in those debates forever ago, really...
Well, that's because they just disagreed on their definition of truth. It took them 2 full 3-hour conversations to just understand that one is viewing truth through a metaphorical truth and one is viewing truth through an objective materialistic perspective. But okay, so but okay, this is the reason why philosophy is so important to me and why it actually illuminates, right? Philosophy, and to me, philosophy is like the meta conversation, right? Like we have like meta ethics, we have meta cognition, thinking about ethics. To me, philosophy is the tools that we use by which we can say, hey, Jordan, hey, Sam, quit having a 3-hour conversation. Let's define our terms here. What do we mean by truth? What's our epistemology, right? Like what we did in our first and second episode with our worldviews. I think that's so important because now when you ask me questions, now when you confront me with something that I'm unfamiliar with, you understand my thought processes, you understand my philosophies and my core beliefs about the world, so you reinterpret your questions through that lens.
Or at least try to,
right? The same way that I tried to do that with my question towards Jordan Peterson, right? Of like, okay, Jordan Peterson respects Steel Manning. Jordan Peterson respects that there are narratives that actually help people. But for some odd reason, he's just not talking about the East at all. And and so how do we bridge that in a way that, like, this was something that Alex O'Connell talked about, where when he was in conversation with Ben Shapiro, he's like, I noticed when I had a question that was more, that came from an orientation of confrontation, Ben Shapiro would respond with confrontation. But if I came to the question with a genuine desire to actually learn his belief about it or try to seek truth alongside him, Ben Shapiro would respond in a very like more objective, thoughtful response. And so Alex O'Connor was saying, I think the same thing is with Peterson as well. Like the way that we approach these characters, we're either going to get the woke moralists or we're going to get a genuine desire to actually try to bridge these gaps.
So does he believe in God? No, you know what?
Have you seen Jonathan Vivek's conversation with Lex Fridman?
No, I have not.
Probably the most important podcast I've watched to date. He talks about there's different forms of knowledge. There's propositional knowledge, there's procedural knowledge, and he gives 2 others. But I think this distinction is really important. In the West, all we care about is propositional, right? Like all of our cognitive thinking, right? Like PowerPoint presentations. But when we teach kids how to ride a bike, we're not putting their face in front of a PowerPoint presentation on how to ride a bike for 3 hours. We're getting them out there and they're in the world, embodied, moving, right? And this is where the West has lost procedural knowledge. On my way to my new job on my first case, I was feeling really anxious, and my girlfriend was like, you were over prepared. Like, you are so knowledgeable on what you have to do. You should not feel nervous at all. And she's like, you know what you got to do? You just got to fake it till you make it. And I was like, and I kind of convinced myself of that. I was like, yeah, I actually have all of the cognitive resources and the propositional knowledge to do great in this new job. But what I realized is the reason why I was anxious is because I wasn't fully prepared, because I wasn't procedurally prepared, because this was the first time that I actually procedurally was in the world embodying all those propositions that I memorized, right? And so that's why I was anxious, because I actually was unprepared.
Well, I mean, working in this world, like working in anything like social work, clinical therapy, any of that world where you're working with other people, their emotions, their feelings, goal setting, whatever it is you're working on, like with those clients, experience is not, I mean, professionalism, background knowledge, and almost the most important part is experience. But I do think personality definitely plays a key when it comes with working.
Be higher in trait
people.
Openness?
I guess that's one way of putting it, I am
incredibly empathetic.
Empathetic and compassionate.
Yeah, because you know that
and compassionate.
You have to celebrate the small wins, because you know that some people are just so off the beaten path that just like one positive step towards the right direction.
Well, it depends. It depends, because also at some points you're going to work at something with somebody from a completely different perspective.
Sometimes you're familiar with.
Well, yeah, sometimes it's going to be totally out of the box, like a game of Uno or a game of Jenga.
Out of the box. Those are fun. I'm familiar with that.
It builds relationships. And over time, a way of like this is a different way in. And it depends on who you're working. I mean, there's no way to truly understand the amount of experiences when working with people. especially in like this sort of world, because everybody's going to have a different experience. And here, you know what? Sure, I'm agreeing with you. I think philosophy should help a way on how like people like in our positions can work with learned experience, because when people focus too much on like CBT, for example, it's just that technically doesn't actually work for everyone. Do you know what I mean? And I think this is where the beneficial of understanding of more mysticism, religions, will be beneficial to people.
There are other methodologies by which can produce therapeutic outcomes that are not just our philosophical proposition.
Absolutely. And a lot of that is...
Wow, that sounded like ChatGPT.
Yeah, right? Doesn't it? Don't we all just sound like ChatGPT at the end of the day? I'd love to just record like 5 hours of myself talking and be like, talk like me. See, I want to see how insane I really am.
No. Okay, so here's the thing. So ChatGPT has a memory, right? It's building up your conversations. You should ask it to have a conversation with you, but try to take on your perspective.
Can you, have you ever just asked and been like, build me a philosophy of myself?
You can, yeah. My girlfriend actually sent me a prompt where you ask it, based off of all of our interactions, give me a summary of what you think like I am truly like. And it was eerily good.
Based on all our interactions.
Sure, we've discussed...
Damn, you got like a British accent?
Yeah, I always do the British accent.
So you ready? So the prompt is, based off of all of our interactions, can you give me a detailed summary of what you think I'm like and what you think my core beliefs are?
Based on all of our interactions, can you give me a detailed summary of what you think I'm like and what you think my core beliefs are?
Oh, sure. From our interactions, I gather you're deeply intellectual, with a strong interest in social issues and the dynamics of human behavior. You're drawn to exploring complex philosophical concepts, particularly those related to power and societal structures. You're also practical and compassionate, focusing on applying theoretical knowledge to real-world problems, especially in the realm of social work. Your diverse culinary tastes and interest in health-conscious meal planning suggest you value variety and well-being. Overall, you appear thoughtful, curious, and committed to making a positive impact in your field and the lives of others. Does that sound about right?
Interesting. I see where it pulls from. Obviously it's not like an all.
It's only had
thing.
A few months to actually to get to know you.
Yeah, and I use it to learn. Like, I gotta be honest. Like, I have this one professor that is a potato, and
wait, slow down. Please describe what that means.
You never heard that term?
No.
Like, I'm a total potato. Potato it basically means useless.
They're a rock.
They're a potato. You know what I mean? They might as well just you might as well put a potato in front of the class that sits there and just like
and just like flew around my room before you came. Okay.
So I have this one professor that's like a total potato, and everything that they teach, I literally put into ChatGPT and then I start discussing it. And then I take notes on that and I ask it for sources to kind of double check to make sure that what it is giving me is actually correct. But it has been an amazing educational source in a classroom for when you have a potato of a teacher.
My girlfriend's professors in nursing school is honestly brutally disgustingly horrible, and she pays for the full version of ChatGPT, and that's been saving her ass.
Oh yeah, no, listen, dude. I mean, I the first year of social work school.
But isn't it crazy that the mechanism by which we are learning the most is absolutely free, and you're paying how much money to go to social work school?
I don't want to talk about it. You know what I mean? I mean, like much of the benefit I get actually is from the professor's experience and their conversations on things that they're interested in, they're working in. You know what I mean? So like, there is a benefit with that, but so like in some classes I pay attention, in other classes the professors are potatoes, and
you're trying to follow your curiosity.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a huge tangent. We can kind of end it here. Is there any sound argument in your worldview that what Sam Altman and what Ilya and the leaders of OpenAI have created might be one of the greatest gifts to mankind?
To answer it like a Zen monk, we shall see.
And we shall see.
Seriously, I don't know. That Do you know that? That's like the
I don't know.
koan.
I mean, like, we shall certainly see how it ends up. But I think
seriously, we shall see.
I think right now it's just an amazing gift to humanity.
I
I think it's worth like to give like the Nobel Peace Prize to.
agree.